U.S. government will grant them asylum. The refugee camp owes its existence to former President Donald Trump's Remain in Mexico program. That administration formerly called the program, his critics say perversely, the Migrant Protection Protocol. Thousands of asylum seekers are waiting in the squalid Matamoros camp and in shelters in inhospitable Mexican border cities like Tijuana, Juarez, and Reynosa. Trump's policy required that asylum seekers wait in Mexico rather than letting them into the U.S. to await their court hearings, because some of them disappear into the interior after they lose their asylum cases. The cold, the wind, when it rains there's mud, lots of mosquitoes, says Sandra Isabel Zuniga, a 38-year-old Honduran refugee who lives in a flimsy tent with a 13-year-old son in the Matamoros camp. Lots of rats. The rats get into all of our belongings. Zuniga says she fled an abusive husband and arrived last March, just as U.S. authorities shut the border because of coronavirus pandemic. To pass the time, Zuniga sews flowery COVID masks and teaches at the Sidewalk School, which offers free instruction to migrant children waiting in Mexico. Now there's a new president. I'll keep praying that God touches his heart and they come up with a strategy to help us here, she says. Life is really rough here. Human Rights First and Physicians for Human Rights have documented appalling conditions for an estimated 25,000 refugees waiting along the Mexican border. Kidnapping, extortion, and physical and sexual violence. Hours after his inauguration, Biden signed an order suspending the Remain in Mexico program, but he told the immigrants to stay put while his Homeland Security Department fashions a new plan. Meanwhile, local U.S. officials are concerned. Right after Christmas, federal agents shut down a border crossing between El Paso and Juarez, Mexico, when hundreds of frustrated asylum seekers, mainly Cubans, protested on the international bridge. This week, El Paso's Office of Emergency Management made preparations for new surges of immigrants. In McAllen, which experienced a humanitarian crisis in 2018, Mayor Jim Darling remembers when the Border Patrol was dropping off as many as 1,000 immigrant mothers and children a day at the downtown bus station. He says he doesn't want to see that happen again. You know, we can't have everybody in Central America come here, Darling says. The education, health, and all the concerns they'll bring with them to this country. That makes no sense. We can't afford it, and we have to take care of our own. Back in 2018, Sister Norman Pimentel, director of Catholic Charities at the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, was overseeing a shelter that received hundreds of immigrant families a day. It was unbelievable for me to see humanity in such a hurting, suffering state, she recalled. The truth is, most U.S. immigration judges deny the sorts of asylum claims brought by Central Americans. Still, Pimentel thinks whatever the Biden administration comes up with, there will be a dramatic improvement over the Trump years. It's my belief that the United States has the power and the capacity to respond correctly to do the job, she says. We do. We just haven't put our efforts in the right place. Don't just put them all together as all criminals, because they're not. She's hopeful the new administration will create a new paradigm that maintains border security but respects the claims of people who come seeking protection. And here we have another example of something that's like, it's a desperate situation right now and has been for a while. And so the obvious answer is to do something big about it right now. But it's not going to happen right now. And that's going to frustrate people. It's going to make people angry, and it's also going to give time to the people who want to push back on it, plenty of time to create all the arguments in the world for how awful it is and how it's all Biden's fault, and if only we'd kept Trump, this wouldn't have happened, blah, blah, blah. So those of us who have any influence at all, any kind of platform, I have a very small platform here that I can talk to people with, need to keep reminding everybody that we're not where we should be. We're way, way behind. And it's going to take a while just to get to where we should be, much less make progress to where we want to be. Just saying it, and I'm going to say it over and over again until somebody hears it. I don't know who. Okay, moving on. This is from Reuters, and it's entitled, U.S. to Reverse Trump's Draconian Immigration Policies, Biden Tells Mexican President. The United States plans to reverse the Trump administration's draconian immigration approach while working on policies addressing the causes of migration, President Joe Biden told his Mexican counterpart, the White House said on Saturday. In a Friday call with Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, Biden outlined his plan to create new legal pathways for immigration and improve the process for people requesting asylum, according to an account of the call released by the White House. Priorities include reversing the previous administration's draconian immigration policies, the White House said. The two leaders agreed to work together towards reducing irregular migration, the White House said in this release. Mexico has a major role to play in Biden's plan for immigration reform. Earlier this month, Mexico helped coordinate efforts in Central America to contain a large caravan of migrants heading for the United States. Mexico's foreign ministry also said it had begun talks with Washington about a COVID-19-related order signed by Biden to establish firmer health protocols for people entering U.S. territory. The call was pleasant and respectful, López Obrador said in a brief Twitter post. Everything indicates relations will be good and for the benefit of our people and nation, he said. Nevertheless, Biden's inauguration comes at a time of simmering tension over a now-dropped U.S. investigation into former Mexican Defense Minister Salvador Cienfuegos. Cracking down on both legal and illegal immigration was a core focus of Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump. Biden, meanwhile, has made an early push for a bill that would open a path for citizenship for the roughly 11 million people living in the United States illegally, though even his allies in Congress acknowledge that may be a Herculean task. So he's off to a good start, at least. I think that's a good thing. He's actually talking to neighbors and not threatening them. And anyway, I'm going to try. It's going to take me a while. Let me admit in advance here, it's going to take me a while to just sort of get the bad taste of the last 4 years out of my mouth, so to speak. The past doesn't go away. The damage Trump has done is not going to go away, and I'm going to keep talking about it. But I have to talk about it as something that has been done and that we're moving on from rather than something that's ongoing. And I'm hoping that sooner rather than later I will be able to do that. But for a while now, I'm going to still be very bitter about it, and it will come across in my reporting, so to speak. I guess you can't really call what I do here reporting. My opinion offering, my news reading, my editorial asides, or whatever you want to call them. Okay, here's another opinion piece. This is from the Seattle Times, entitled Stop Cruel Immigration Detention. Close the Northwest Processing Center. A new House bill prohibiting private for-profit detention facilities in Washington state would force closure of the immigrant jail in Tacoma, now euphemistically called the Northwest ICE Processing Center, or NWIPC. The state legislature must support HB 1090. The NWIPC, run by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and the GEO Group, recently made the news for its cruel solitary confinement practices and hunger strikes. Sadly, there is even more to the story. Working with the Washington group La Resistencia, we have conducted years of personal interviews with detainees, and they suffer a range of grave problems: inadequate medical care, poor nutrition, unsanitary living conditions, labor rights for the privilege of cleaning the facility, among other tasks, detainees are paid $1 per day. Over the past several years, immigrant detention centers across the U.S. have been the target of serious criticism as they cut corners to boost corporate profits. The U.S. House Committee on Homeland Security has condemned deficient medical, dental, and mental health care, segregation abuses, and obstacles to legal counsel. The Department of Homeland Security's own Inspector General has repeatedly denounced egregious violations of detention standards. Congress recently passed a resolution censoring medical procedures, including hysterectomies, performed on immigrant women without their informed consent at a detention center in Georgia. This was the shocking reality even before our nation was overwhelmed by the COVID-19 pandemic. In March, these crowded immigration facilities, already with flawed health care and unsanitary conditions, became a tinderbox ready to burst into flames. In response, Seattle University's International Human Rights Clinic, Global Rights Advocacy, and La Resistencia filed complaints with the United Nations Human Rights Institution and the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, based in Washington, D.C. Soon after, a group of UN human rights authorities urged ICE and the GEO group to release immigrants from the NWIPC and other detention centers. The Inter-American Commission adopted a rare emergency resolution to protect the rights to life, personal integrity, and health of all immigrants held in Tacoma. Both the UN and Commission have monitored the situation at the NWIPC and demanded reports from governmental agencies. Predictably, COVID-19 made its way to the NWIPC and to other detention centers and prisons around the country. Under pressure from federal courts and various advocacy campaigns, ICE has released some at-risk detainees, but also has deported many others, exacerbating the outbreak around the globe. Yet thousands remain confined throughout the U.S., including many with underlying medical conditions, which, according to the CDC, pose increased danger for severe disease illness. As for the NWIPC specifically, a Seattle federal judge found that social distancing remains impossible and is not mandated. Detainees continue to have contact with detainees from other housing units. Guards are not required to wear PPE, and testing remains inadequate. In the last several months, we have spoken to detainees who corroborated this state of affairs. We have met detainees in high-risk circumstances, suffering from cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. Some were over 60 years old, and all were terrified for their lives. As COVID-19 cases surge to all-time highs across the nation, we cannot trust the lives of detained immigrants to ICE and profit-seeking corporations. Their deliberate indifference, in the words of a federal judge in California and Massachusetts, has been proven time and time again. While the NWIPC's population has dwindled, hundreds continue to be exposed to senseless hazards and suffering. Immigration detention has never been necessary. International human rights law holds it to be a disproportionate approach, a measure of last resort, because far less restrictive measures are available to ensure attendance at court hearings. Of course, shuttering more than 200 detention centers in the U.S. would also save billions in taxpayer dollars. This situation comprised a blatant violation of human rights before COVID-19, and it is all the more dire now. It's time to approve HB 1090 and to close the NWIPC forever. Yeah, this is going to be another big problem and another hard thing to solve for the Biden administration, because these for-profit groups are probably big contributors to campaigns. They make lots of money, and so they spend a lot of money so that they can keep making money. And they employ local people in certain areas who are going to be resistant to the idea of closing them. You have this big business that employs, a couple hundred people in your town, and somebody says, no, we're going to close this down. You're suddenly left with this giant building. What do you do with it? You're left with all these people out of work. What do you do with them? you're left with this big corporation that makes billions of dollars a year and is intent on continuing to make billions of dollars a year, pushing you to keep them in business. And that's a tough political call for anybody. So while I completely agree that for-profit prisons all should be dismantled and done away with, I don't think it's going to be a quick fix. Again, I hate to say it, but again, it's going to be difficult. So we'll see. We'll see what he does. We'll see how he does it. Anyway, moving on. This is from the National Law Review, entitled Biden Immigration Activity on Day One, Taking Down the Walls. With the stroke of a pen, President Biden immediately commenced the deconstruction of the southern border wall and several other immigration policies of the prior administration, including the pre-COVID travel ban. Here is a summary of the president's immigration-related executive actions issued during his first days in office. Revoking the pre-COVID travel ban. Entitled Presidential Proclamation on Ending Discriminatory Bans on Entry to the United States, this proclamation revokes Executive Order 13780 of March 6, 2017. Proclamation. Inventing a new word here. I'm just adding a few syllables. Proclamation 9645 of September 24, 2017. Proclamation 9723 of April 10, 2018. And Proclamation 9983 of January 31, 2020, the so-called Muslim travel bans, which collectively banned certain nationals of Burma, Chad, Eritrea, Iran, Kyrgyzstan, Libya, Nigeria, North Korea, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Tanzania, Venezuela, and Yemen from traveling or immigrating to the United States. The proclamation directs the Secretary of State within 45 days to deliver plans for expeditiously adjudicating any pending visa applications and re-adjudicating applications previously denied pursuant to the travel ban. In addition, the proclamation calls for the Secretaries of Homeland Security and State, in consultation with the Director of National Intelligence, within 120 days, to review current screening and vetting procedures for immigrant and non-immigrant entries, including the use of social media identifiers, and provide recommendations to improve screening and vetting processes. Off to a good start. Number 2. COVID-related travel restrictions enhanced. Novel coronavirus travel restrictions remain. The presidential proclamation on novel coronavirus restricting the entry of certain individuals traveling from China, Iran, the European Schengen area, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Brazil remain in effect until revoked by presidential action. The State Department's previously posted guidance for national interest exceptions for travels from the Schengen area, United Kingdom, and Ireland remain in effect. COVID testing requirements for all arriving international travelers. Effective January 26, 2021, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, will require all air passengers entering the United States, including U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents, to present a negative COVID-19 test taken within 3 calendar days of departure or proof of recovery from the virus within the last 90 days. The new requirements expand on a similar order issued in December requiring testing for travel from the United Kingdom. Furthermore, the International Travel section of Executive Order on Promoting COVID-19 Safety in Domestic and International Travel details new policy directives impacting international travel, including requiring travelers seeking to enter the United States from a foreign country to produce proof of a recent negative COVID-19 test prior to entry, and complying with other applicable CDC guidelines concerning international travel, including recommended periods of self-quarantine or self-isolation after entry into the United States. Assess the CDC's order implementing COVID testing requirements to determine if regulations are needed to address the timing and types of COVID-19 tests, methods of providing of test results, feasibility of implementing protective public health measures such as testing, self-quarantine, and self-isolation on arrival for travelers entering the United States from countries where COVID-19 tests are inaccessible, particularly where such inaccessibility of tests would affect the ability of United States citizens and lawful permanent residents to return to the United States, and measures to prevent fraud. Provide plans to implement compliance with CDC recommended periods of self-quarantine or self-isolation for arriving international travelers consistent with applicable law. Directs various U.S. agencies to coordinate with foreign governments and international organizations to establish guidelines for public health measures, including quarantine, testing, COVID-19 vaccination, follow-up testing, and symptom monitoring, air filtration requirements, environmental decontamination standards, and contact tracing associated with safe international travel. Also directs an assessment of the feasibility of linking COVID-19 vaccination to international certificates of vaccination, or prophylaxis, ICVP, and producing electronic versions of ICVPs. And, with regard to the seaports of entry and land borders with Canada and Mexico, directs U.S. agencies to immediately coordinate with the Canadian and Mexican governments regarding public health protocols for land ports of entry, and then submit a plan to the President regarding implementation of such health measures at the ports of entry. Okay, moving on. Putting the brakes on DHS and DOL rules altering the H-1B process and prevailing wage levels. White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain issued a memorandum regarding review of pending regulatory actions which directs 1. All rules pending and not yet published in the Federal Register must be immediately withdrawn, and 2. Agencies must consider postponing for 60 days the effective dates for regulations that have been published but not yet in effect. As a result, the modified version of the Department of Homeland Security's DHS Strengthening the H-1B Non-Immigrant Visa Classification Program Final Rule, these are such long names. I wish I like acronyms better. The H-1B rule. Yeah, you could have said that. Sent to the Federal Register on January 15th, but not yet published, will be withdrawn. In addition, implementation of the Department of Labor's DOL, restructuring of H-1B, H-1B1, E3, and PRERM wage levels rule, and DHS's final rule entitled Modification of Registration Requirement for Petitioners Seeking to File Cap Subject H-1B Petitions. Sorry. It's just these are too long. Will be delayed. See our prior posts summarizing the H-1B and wage rules and the H-1B registration rule. Okay. The names of these things are just someone with a typewriter. God, I'm showing my age. Someone is writing these things and not saying them very often, because if you have to say them, they're just ridiculously long. Okay. I'm running out of time here. I've got to finish this. So, not another brick in the wall. In the proclamation of the termination of emergency with respect to the southern border of the United States and redirection of funds diverted to border wall construction, President Biden terminates the prior Trump proclamations declaring a national emergency at the southern border. As a result, all construction and related allocation of funds for the southern border wall are halted, while plans are drawn up to redirect funding and repurpose the related contracts. I mean, okay, as an aside, this border wall was never, it was always this aspirational, thumbing their nose at the rest of the world plan by Trump that was supposed to be this big, smack in the face to immigrants. We don't want you here. You people down south, you notice there was never any border wall between here and Canada. Oh, no, that wasn't the problem. But Mexico, oh, yeah, we don't want those people. So it was always a big insult to the world that never meant anything, never would have really accomplished anything, and was just a huge waste of money. So parts of the border wall that are built, I don't care. You can walk around them because they don't go anywhere. And a lot of them are just going to fall down, and good riddance to them. So in a way, this is mostly just an emotional victory. It's a victory for just sanity returning to the government. But yeah, I mean, it's something worth celebrating just because of its symbolic sense. But otherwise, who cares? People can climb over, they can dig under, they can go around. It never amounted to anything. It was never anything. It was stupid. Stupid from the word go. Okay, enough of that. My bitterness is showing through again, once again. All right, additional executive orders and agency directives. Interior enforcement. Executive order on the revision of civil immigration enforcement policies and priorities. Revoking previous Executive Order 13768 of January 25th, 2017, otherwise known as Enhancing Public Safety in the Interior of the United States, and directing the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the DHS Secretary and other government officials to review any agency actions developed pursuant to Executive Order 13768 and to take action, including issuing revised guidance and appropriate and consistent with applicable law. In compliance, the DHS Secretary issued a memorandum directing DHS components to conduct a review of immigration enforcement policies and pausing removal and deportation of certain non-citizens for 100 days. DACA, President Memorandum directing the DHS Secretary in consultation with the Attorney General to take all actions he deems appropriate, consistent with applicable law, to preserve and fortify deferred action for childhood arrivals. DED for Liberians, Presidential Memorandum restating deferred enforced departure for Liberians through June 30th, 2022, staying the removal of any Liberian national who is present in the United States and who is under a grant of DED as of January 10th, 2021, with certain exceptions. Finally, census. Executive order rescinding a prior Trump administration order and memorandum that sought to limit counting of the U.S. undocumented population in the national census. President Biden's order seeks to ensure that federal funds and congressional apportionment are distributed without regard to immigration status. Oh God, there's a lot more, but I am running out of time. So I want to thank you for joining us, however you did. If the radio's back on, then on the air. If it's online streaming, that's great. I'm glad that you do that and take advantage of that opportunity. Or UPTV. Hi. I look very golden today for some reason. I don't know why. Something about the light is giving me a nice tan, which I don't really have. Or YouTube, anytime. You can watch us on YouTube anytime because we're always there, ready to talk to you about this stuff. In any event, I thank you for participating, for joining, for listening, for watching, whatever it is you did, and I hope that you will join us again sometime. See you later. Bye.